We will now move to the next and the last presentation for the day. And it is from, I would like to share my screen to introduce one of my favorite teachers of JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Dr. M.D. Ravi.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Dr. M.D. Ravi is currently working as Professor and Unit Chief, Department of Pediatrics, JSS Medical College, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Mysuru. Sir pursued his MBBS and MD in Pediatrics from KMC Manipal, worked at various capacities at JSS Medical College from Assistant Professor to Professor and Head, Unit Chief, Medical Superintendent of JSS Hospital, Vice Principal Clinicals, and Director JSS Hospital. Sir has vast experience in academics and clinical practice, and most importantly, the clinical research. Sir has been PI and is PI in large number of clinical trials in pediatric age group, especially the vaccine trials. We call him as boss of clinical trials in vaccinology, and vast experience in vaccine related trials. We have any doubts related to the vaccine trials, sir is the answer for that. And he played a pivotal role in establishing and functioning of CDSA CCRE, that is Center for Clinical Research Excellence at JSS Hospital. Lot we hear from him how he has established the center, starting from the office till the archival. Everything is very well appreciated from people not within the JSS, within Mysore, within India, from the people abroad also. So I am so much of inspired from his way of functioning and his way of meticulousness in, as Pro Chancellor sir was very aptly telling, a meticulous planner, and the way in which he executes his ideas. And he has more than 50 publications in various national and international journals, a passionate clinician, a very good teacher, a very interesting person to work with, and a very passionate person to grab the ideas from. I would like to request sir to give us an idea about building a culture of accountability. Over to you, sir. I'm stopping sharing my screen. I request you to kindly share.
Thank you, Praveen, for that excellent introduction, most of which I don't deserve, really speaking. But
you deserve, sir.
Anyway, the thing is now that, like my predecessors, I am also a little bit at a sea here because I'm a pediatrician and I've been asked to talk about the culture of accountability. Again, a lot of it is information which I garnered over the past 2 weeks, which is the time that I was given. Now, the question is, what exactly is accountability? 99% of all failures come from people who have a habit of making excuses. What I didn't say, this is what George Washington Carver said. So the purpose of today's talk is to try and identify how not to make excuses and how to make other people also not make excuses. The objective of a leader is not just to not make excuses, it's also to see that others don't make excuses. So you don't have to go through a file of excuses. So defining accountability per se is difficult. It is a very popular term, everybody uses it, but it's very well known that it's not well defined. So Schiedler, long back in 1999, said that it is an unexplored concept whose meaning remains evasive, whose boundaries are fuzzy and whose internal structures confusing. So accountability is not that easy to pin down. So really, if you want to bring it down to something, accountability is just the idea that individuals are responsible for what they do. They are responsible for their actions and you are under an obligation to explain why you did it. That is to explain your choice. So if you want to define it fairly simply, it is the manners and methods by which somebody justifies and accepts the responsibility for what he or she has done. Now, when you're talking about accountability in healthcare, the stakes are very much higher. Because when you're talking about human beings, you're talking about accountability not only to yourself and to your staff members, but to a whole lot of other people who are your patients, their relatives, and so forth. So accountability in healthcare is much more complex than, let us say, accountability in business. So if you want to really identify whether the person is accountable, you have to measure. Anything requires a measurement. So how do we measure something like accountability? It is more likely that accountability will be something that will become online if you are able to measure it. So there have to be some measures that you can do. There are two types of things that you can do. Financial accountability, which is involving and tracking and reporting of all your financial and monetary resources. And the other is called performance accountability, which is how, as clinicians, we refer to how well we treat our patients, how all our patients respond to our treatment, what the patients think of us, which is your patient satisfactory survey, how well we meet the goals that we have set for ourselves or which the hospital has set for us. These are performance measures. So on that basis, you can divide accountability into two basic types, actually three, but I'm not going to touch on the third. Financial accountability basically concerns tracking, reporting of allocation of your funds, what money you got, how you spent it, where you spent it, how did you utilize it. And for this, you use all your financial tools like auditing and budgeting and accounting and so forth. This is primarily in the domain of the finance department and of the administration. As clinicians, we have a thing called performance accountability, which is you have to demonstrate and account for your performance. In the point, it may be in the point of view of patient care, it may be in the point of view of how many patients you have, what are your results, how many patients survive, how many critical patients you've treated, and there will be certain agreed upon performance targets which your institution might have set for you. How much of these have you met? So when you say that performance accountability and financial accountability, these are not two things which can be separated completely. Performance accountability is linked to financial accountability in that the financial part of it is what the institution has given you in the form of monetary benefits or in the form of equipment, the cost of the equipment, the money that is being given for pharmaceutical products, etc., etc. So these are things that you need to account for. But it is distinct. Performance accountability is distinct in that financial accountability is the emphasis is primarily on procedural compliance. You've been given some money, you have a procedure which has to go through. This is how you spend it, and this is how you account for it, and so forth. Whereas performance accountability concentrates on results. What have you achieved as far as your goals have been, with the goals that you have set for yourself or the goals that have been set for by your organization? How much of it have you achieved? So there's a difference between your accountability from what you have spent and an accountability from what you have achieved from what you have spent. So this is just a chart which tells you roughly that there's a little bit of difference between financial accountability and the performance accountability, cost accounting, the personnel operations, all that is your financial accounting. And the focus is mostly on compliance with input and with procedural standards. Whereas with performance, the emphasis is on improvement, on learning, and on assurance. Assurance basically here is in the form of what the regulatory bodies require from you, the legal requirements, the policy framework, and so forth. Now, there are a lot of approaches to accountability. How you're going to approach the fact that you want to make people accountable it's an individual phenomenon. But there will be three basic elements. One is that you must first define your objectives. Your objects have to be clearly defined. Your objectives or goals have to be clearly defined so that you know what you're trying to get. The second is you should be able to measure how much you have reached, whether you reached your goal, how far you've reached. So there's an element of requirement of measurement and monitoring of your achievement of the goals. And the third is you have to have a set of consequences which happen if the goals have not been reached, if they are not satisfactory. Now, this sounds a little bit punitive, but it is something that is part and parcel of accountability. Now, in healthcare industry, accountability also includes very clear policies and procedures, but not just telling people what are the rules and how you should follow them. There is so much more than that. For example, the essence of accountability is answerability. That means you should be able to answer for the reasons, for the questions that have been raised as to why you have done this and what has been done and what was the why this result happened. So accountable means you have an obligation to answer questions regarding the decisions that you made or the action that you performed or the results that you have achieved. So it is the ability to answer or to justify what you have done. So basically, you can ask two types of accountability questions. One is just asking for information to be given to you. How did you spend the money? How many patients have you seen? What are the results of your vaccination strategy and so forth? This is basically budget information or a description of your activities or output. It's a narrative. The second is a justification, which is not just saying what you have done, but why you have done it. So it is not just providing a whole lot of facts and figures. It is also telling you what you have done and why you have done what you have done. Why did you why did you take this line of therapy? Why did you not take that line of therapy? Why were your results poorer in this case rather than those cases? So there's a justification element. So there's a difference. One is a narrative of what you're doing. The second is a justification of what you've done. Both these come under the realm of accountability. Now, there is no point in having an accountability without having a sanction. It is said that an accountability without sanction, that is without consequences, is a toothless accountability. So it is considered to be a weak accountability. Sanction is not necessarily something that is very major. A sanction could be just something that you call the person and discuss with them and say, look, this is where something went wrong. It varies depending upon what was the problem and how you are going to tackle it. But there should be some form of response to something that goes wrong. Now, when a healthcare organization holds themselves or their employees accountable, it improves the function of that particular organization because you are identifying mistakes. And once you identify mistakes and you realize that it's a mistake, then you can improve on yourself. So there's a continuity or continuously improving system that's going on. And accountability, therefore, in healthcare, once your systems improve, you're getting patient feedback, the doctor-patient trust improves because the patients feel that you're actually bothering about them. Your resource misuse becomes less. If you say, I'm going to take a CT scan for this patient, and you have a justification as to why you've done the CT scan, not because I feel I want to do a CT scan. So the misuse of the resources comes down and the quality of healthcare will improve. So if you are able to justify to your patient and say, okay, I've done the CT scan for the following reason, this is what I expect to find, and this is how it's going to make a difference to your treatment, then the doctor-patient relationship improves. If you say, I'm going to do a CT scan because it's a done thing, then the patient feels that you are distancing yourself from them. So there is a problem that most people feel that by saying that I am accountable, I am taking the responsibility for what I have done, it is like saying that if something goes wrong, I am going to be blamed. And so it's like a threat that's hanging over your head. Not true. You should look at it as a way of improving yourself. None of us is God. None of us knows everything. So one of the very well-known physicians once said, what we know about the human body and about medicine is like a grain of sand on the beach. We keep evolving. Things that I learned when I was an undergraduate, we disproved when I was a postgraduate, and we've been continuously disproving it now that in the several years of my service. So we need to update, we need to change. And the only thing that is constant about anything is that it has to change. So if you think of accountability as a method of improving yourself, I am accountable, I have done this. If it was right, I say, okay, I am now on the right track. If it's wrong, I say, okay, I've done a mistake and this is how I should not do it and this is how I should do it. So accountability, if you look chance to grow, then it becomes something that is not a threat. Now, anybody for that matter is intrinsically motivated to fulfill their commitment for whatever reason. All right, it may be that when you go home, you leave your shoes outside because otherwise somebody will feel that you are tracking food, you stuff inside, or you go home, you change your clothes immediately because you don't want to infect your family. In your hospital, you see your patients 3 times a day because if their patient is sick and you feel happier when you see the patient 3 times a day. Those are all motivations for you to fulfill your commitment. But if it's mandated, That means that somebody tells you, go and see your patient 3 times a day, whether it deserves it or not, it's very unlikely that their commitment is going to be filled. So neither will mandating a commitment, telling a person that this is the rule and you have to do it, it's not going to be effective and it's not going to be sustainable. The motivation should come from inside. And what you need to do as a leader is to get that motivation to come to the surface. Now, if you look, there are two ways of looking at it. You can have a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. Now, a top-down approach, which I'll show you in the next slide, a top-down approach will make the person, your employee, feel like a child. Feels like he's like a school child being told what to do. Whereas if you allow him to take a couple of decisions, he feels that you are giving him respect. So, a top-down approach is basically where the people on the top tell the people at the bottom what is to be done, and they do it fairly mindlessly and then just report back that what they have done. So the tasks for the lower levels are delegated from the upper levels. The lower levels do not participate in the making of these tasks. Whereas the bottom-up approach is what I think Dr. Arun was also talking about, where you have the employees also participating in the process of making a task, or you tell them, look, this is what needs to be done. How you do it, I'll leave it to you. Or you give me your inputs on how it has to be done. So you have an employee input. This gives you the person a lot more motivation to participate. There is the organization, everybody collaborates. And then when the tasks are completed, you just give it to the higher ups and say, okay, the job is done. And this is how we did it. So this is called a bottom-up approach. And as far as motivating or getting people to work, that's a far better approach than a top-down approach. So, but before that, when you say that an employee has to be accountable for what he has done, you must have fairly clear guidelines and regulations that they have to follow. Okay, these are the things that you have to do, but this is the limits within which you have to do it. I mean, you can't do anything at any time that you feel like. If you want to do, let's say, in the hospital, so in order for employees to be accountable, they must have clear guidelines to be followed, and they need to be told as to what standards they are being measured against. What are your benchmarks that you are measuring them against? Say you are tracking infection rates, you are tracking patient satisfaction, whatever it is. You have to tell them what are the benchmarks, what is your level of infection rate that you will consider acceptable, what is the level of patient satisfaction. You can't get every single patient being happy with what you've done. Is it 70 or 80%? So you tell them what is your benchmark, and then you can hold them accountable against it. Importantly, you have to give them updates on progress. What was your thing? Last month, what was the infection rate? This month, how's your infection rate? Have you improved? Have you not got better? Have you become worse? That will help them to modify and improve on themselves. So in order to course correct or correct what they are doing, people need information in order to correct themselves and go towards their goals. And the most effective method of feedback, however, is a frequent conversation between the top level or the managers and the employees. Now, there are 3 steps which I have found which help with greater accountability. Leading with accountability is not just telling people what to do, but is helping them to achieve their goals. So you should think of it as a shared goal, a goal between you as well as the employee. You can't hold somebody accountable for something that is beyond his control. All right, patient has come extremely sick and you're not able to save him. It's beyond his control. He's done whatever he can. Or the cost factor is overshot because the patient had a complication, whatever. These are beyond control. So as a physician, a leader's role would be in helping people who are to succeed in areas where they are having problems. So in basically helping colleagues to succeed in areas where they struggle. So this is your job in making people accountable. You help them. Don't just say you produce the result. If they have a problem, you should be able to help them as well. So you have to be intentional. First step is create a culture, is set clear expectations. This is what I expect from you. Don't assume that everybody knows everything about what you need. It is in terms of quality or in terms of performance, you have to explain to the person that this is what I expect of you and this is the goals that you want to set for yourself. And it has to be to each and every member of the team that you're working with. You have to tell them what is the goal that you're set for that person, how he is going to contribute to the total goal. So it's not that every person works as an individual. No man is an island. Everybody works towards a common goal, but each person may have a different uh, part to play in achieving that common goal. So monitoring process is the second part. Monitoring is important because it tells you how the things are progressing. It will give you time to make course correction, identify roadblocks, identify problems which are making performance difficult, and make sure that whatever is required, the implements or the necessary knowledge that is required to achieve the goal is available to the person that you are leading. You have to have objective and transparent data. For example, clinical outcome. What is the outcome of this particular form of treatment? Are you using your safety protocols? Are you using hand washing properly? Your patient experience goal with your operating theater or starting on time. Are your meetings? Have you been attending all your meetings, etc., etc.? These are all very clear terms. You declare the goals that you have set. So this will avoid ambiguity. And when you benchmark the performance, when you put it against the standard and say, this is how you achieved against what you should have done, it becomes transparent. That means the person knows what he was supposed to do and he knows whether he has reached or not reached or is exceeded what he has done. He'll be quite happy about it. The third is that you will always have run into a problem where people will not be able to achieve what they're supposed to do. It may be there may be disruptive behavior, or it may be that he's not being able to achieve his goal, or he may not be committed enough to achieve his goal. This will cause problems with patient care. It can cause the entire team to underperform because one bad apple can ruin an entire battle. So this would be, for example, repeated commitment failures, productive issues, poor clinical outcomes, professional lapses in professionalism. You have become emotional or disruptive behavior where you actually disrupt the functioning of the unit. Now, when this happens, you can't sweep it under the carpet. This has to be faced. So these issues have to be faced upfront, and you have to have an accountability conversation. Discuss with that person. Problem only gets worse if it is ignored and you try to sweep it under the carpet, it's not going to go away. It's going to come back with a bang. So one way of doing this is to do what's called a modified DSC model. Now, a DSC model is a model that was created by two people called Sharon and Gordon Bower. Sharon was a communications expert. She had her own company, and Bower was a clinical psychologist. So these thing called a DSC, which was originally slightly different from what I have described. It was described was there, specified was there, but then commitment was not there. It was consequences. So we have modified it for the healthcare department and describe when you discuss with the person, you describe as clearly as possible what went wrong, what are the things that should have been done, and what was actually happened. You should not draw conclusions at that point. In this time, you just give the data and specify what is the behavior problem that happened. Then explain what are the results of what this happened, including what happened to the team, how did it affect the morale of the team, or how did it affect the outcome of the team, or how did it affect the organization itself. Then you have to specify and tell them what is the change that you desire, what is it that you need to change, and how can you work together with the rest of the key team to come up with a solution to a problem instead of trying to solve it yourself, or how you will communicate with the rest of the team and say, this is a problem that I had, and now this is the mistake that I made, now how do we get out of it? So this is an opportunity to help to build the personal accountability of that individual. And then finally, you need to get a commitment from that person to abide by the action plan or solution. You have created a solution or you created an action plan. You have to get a commitment from that person to say that he will stick to that. So this basically requires that both of you, both the leader and the person you're talking to, have understood what exactly you're talking about and have understood the consequences, both positive and negative, which will happen if and what are the results that are going to happen, either if it is the commitment is not there or if the commitment is there. So this is called a modified DSC model. And it's very important again to say that it's not only important to chastise or to find fault. It's also very important to celebrate progress. If somebody has done something good, you should call him up and say, okay, you've done an excellent job. For a period of time, I was a vice principal in this college and I was in charge of the students. So whenever I have found a student who was doing well, I used to call him up to my room and say, okay, you're doing extremely well. Now, please, like people are going wrong. It's very important that you should also talk to people who are doing well and give them the encouragement that they deserve. So identify, celebrate, and learn from success. This motivates employees and it makes them do more than what they were doing, creates responsibility role models for other people to follow because they say, okay, this guy has been praised. There was an incident where two of our PharmD students published a whole series of articles, and they published so many, and they were students. They published some 5-6 articles in a set of pharmacy journals, and they became peer reviewers for those journals. In between, so there is a thing called ownership. Now, ownership is not that you own the hospital or something like that. Ownership is the feeling that you are an integral part of an organization. Say, if I say I have an ownership for JSS Hospital, it means that everything that happens in JSS Hospital is something that I am personally responsible for, or that if something good happens, then that's something that's good happens to me. If something bad happens, it's something that bad happens to me. So ownership is a state of mind where you feel fully in charge and you do not have to give excuse or blame anybody else for something that needs to be done. It also means to understand, to learn, and to challenge things, with problems that they come, rather than trying to mindlessly follow instructions. So ownership is something that's very important as a leader. You should have ownership of the organization so that you have that feeling that you are the organization also. You are a fundamental part of the organization. So in between these two, ownership and accountability, is a thing called responsibility. The responsibility is where you take responsibility for your actions. It's that strong internal feeling that allows you or drives you to perform your duties with total ownership, that feeling that you are part of the whole story. So the entire leadership team must feel a strong sense of ownership if you are going to be effective leaders for an organization, not only for their area of responsibility. For example, I am a pediatrician. My area of responsibility is the pediatric care. But that should not be the only thing. If I am a leader, I should also bother about whether the hospital infection control is going on, whether the vaccination is going on, whether security is working all right, whether the food is being delivered all right, whether the wards are being kept clean. The entire thing is part of my responsibility. That is what is called as ownership. And the entire leadership team should have that feeling that you have to work above and beyond your specific responsibilities. And now it's very important, finally, to understand that you have to lead from the front. Accountability ultimately flows from the top. You have to be accountable, and then you can ask somebody to be accountable. For years, I have been reaching the hospital before 8:45 in the morning, because then I can tell my people to come there before 9 o'clock in the morning. If I go there at 9:30, I have no right to tell them to come that you are coming late. So it is that you have to set an example. You have to do something yourself before you can ask somebody else to do that. So if you want your team to be accountable, you need to be accountable to your team as well. And you have to model your desired behavior by you yourself should demonstrate the highest level of professionalism, accept responsibility for your actions, and showing humility. You have to be accountable yourself. You have to be accountable to yourself, to your team, to your juniors, to the people whom you are reporting to your organization. So the accountability is not just a one-way street. Accountability is both ways. And unless you are accountable, you cannot ask somebody else to be accountable. So if you do that, you will garner the respect of those you lead, and that's the way you inspire others to follow you. Thank you very much for following me. And those are the references. With that, over to you, Praveen.
Thank you very much, sir, for describing all various domains related to the accountability. I was just curious to know what all things you are going to cover related to the accountability and how exactly accountability has to be maintained, how accountability increases credibility of a leader. So you have covered a lot of things related to that, and it was quite inspiring for everyone to whatever we do, we have to be accountable for that. So thank you very much for that wonderful session, sir. So I'm not seeing much questions in the chat box. So I would like to request Pro Chancellor, sir, if you would like to add anything. Thank you, sir.
Just stop sharing the screen. Dr. Ravi.
Sorry. Yeah.
I was just thinking of adding at the end, but you touched upon it at the end, the ownership culture. I think this is a very important trait which I think is to be inbuilt over a period of time. This ownership culture goes a long way in shaping your career, and it helps you to move on. I mean, you don't have to do something to satisfy somebody else. You feel that this belongs to you, and this is how you would like to see how this has helped you to move on. And perhaps that's what has helped me in my own career. I would like to say I didn't wait for anybody to tell when I was at UT how the college should develop. It was my college and I wanted to develop it. That's all. It was simple as that. And I was only seeking orders or directions or finances to take it forward. That's all. There's no question of waiting for a thing. That ownership is very important. If it is your college, your hospital, your patient, I think then the answer is solved with that. And then all the other things follow: accountability, and the type of approach that need to be given, traits to be given. It is excellent, and I would endorse what Dr. BG had put on the message, that today's excellent talks, all three were very clear, crisp, and gave very clear direction. And I think for the viewers and listeners, those who are listening on this thing, I think they would understand that these are all qualities which get ingrained into leadership. These are not just talks about doing it. And these are all the people who are speaking to you have gone through this path and do it. We see Dr. Prashant here back. Prashant, on behalf of our JSS team here, our deepest condolences are with you, and we pray to God for giving you strength to come over this grief. And I know the loss is immeasurable, but we are all with you in this moment. And this is again the example of leadership and accountability and everything which you can see. It's just, his mother passed away yesterday evening, and today he's back here and with us and trying to be with us on this. Thank you, Prashant, and thank you for leading by example.
Thank you, sir.
I fully endorse your expression, sir. More than the ownership, belongingness, which I keep telling to all my colleagues whenever we have a meeting, unless they have belongingness to the organization, the institution, the accountability or the outcome will not be good. Number one. Number two, as Ravi was telling, always we used to meet each other at 8:55 in the parking lot. That is the time. So he was setting himself by example of punctuality, and that's how he could command on the people. And he was the person who was keeping eye on accountability of behavior of the students, right? And the corridors. So I would get 10 cell phones delivered to my office, telling that these students were wandering around with these cell phones in the corridor. So they don't give them back unless you punish them. So this kind of the work execution was done by Ravi in all my career. When he was a vice principal, he helped me a lot in that, and he was very much accountable for every component of work that he did in every level of assignment that was given to him.
Thank you very much, sir. Prashant, sir, would you like to add anything?
No, Praveen, my net connection is quite poor today.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for joining. And now we are almost at the end of today's session. So
Any questions from the audience?
Any questions? Yes. If there are any questions from the audience, you want to raise your hand, we can ask you. We will unmute you, and you can directly ask. Otherwise, you can put it in the question answer session, question answer slot, so that we can ask the question.
I mean, there is one question by Jinsi Sundaran. I think we can open up question answer. You can bring it to the knowledge of.
Pushpalata K has lifted her hand.
I think it was there from quite some time. I think
No,
by
no,
mistake.
by mistake, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Sir, there is a question from Jimsi Sundaran. Accountability is indeed the major ingredient of a leader. But how is it that a leader can draw a line for accountability? Because too much of accountability makes the employee take things for granted, and too less of it doesn't allow to take a novel step and make them monotonous. This is a question, sir.
Accountability, I think there was a slight misunderstanding there. When you say accountable, that means that you are answerable for what you have done. There's no such thing as too much accountability or too little accountability. You set a goal. Okay, I may set a goal for my staff saying that I want that X number of my patients should become better. I mean, it's a stupid goal, but it's just as an example. Or I may say that I want all my staff to be present in the ICU at 9 sharp in the morning. Or as a surgeon, I'll say my OT should start at 8:45 and not at 8:46 or at 8:44. So that is, you have to set your benchmark. You have to say, what is the goal that you want to achieve? Now, a goal could be something that is very big. It can be something that is very small. I'll give an example that when we were undergraduate students, one of our benchmarks was that a male student was not allowed to go into the hospital unless he was wearing shoes, and girls were not allowed to come in with flowers in their hair or with scents. Why have I been signed out?
No, sir, you are audible, sir. Please keep it.
Okay. Girls were not allowed to come in with scent or with colored, very colorful clothes and things. It could be a small goal like that. It would be a goal of saying that, you have to get 60% in your final exams. It could be a goal of saying that all your patients with gastroenteritis should go home. It could be a goal of anything like that. So there is no such thing as too much accountability, too little accountability. Any guideline is a guideline. It is not a law. So a guideline can be modified. What we are sitting with a protocol is something that says, this is the average thing, this is what you need to do. And the idea of putting a guideline is, if you want to deviate from the guideline, you justify and say, this is the reason why I have deviated from this protocol. That is just a method of forcing you to think, of making a change when you thought about why you made the change, and so that you can justify the change. So it's giving the accountability gives you a necessity to think about what you're doing, because at some point you'll have to justify what you've done. So I don't believe there's something as called too much accountability or too little accountability. I'm a very notorious for bending protocols in my unit. I bend my protocols all the time, but the only thing is I document why I have bent my protocol. My staff are very aware of the fact that I bend protocols at regular intervals. But
Absolutely
you
correct. I
justify
think that
what
is
you've done.
Absolutely correct. You cannot draw a rigid line of accountability. There has to be flexibility depending on the situation and capability and feasibility of the situation. Rosie, sir, you have a question from Vidya. She says, after yesterday's session with self-assessment, she has positioned herself in level 3. She is asking you a question, how to go to level 4 and 5.
So level 4 is she should start working with an enemy. So I told level 1 is you are strong, you know how good you are. Level 2 is you play a friendly match with a tough team, or I mean something like from level 1 to level 2 you have to go and play with a tough team, and when you want to move further up level 3, you have to play with or work under a tough taskmaster. I mean, that's what I mean by somebody you don't like, but he is good. So let me go and work with him and learn. I think that's where it will come. And from level 3 to level 4 is just like pushing yourself further to do the best what you know to do it, and also inspire others around. I think that's what I would like to say. I have been receiving similar type of messages to me. Oh, I am at this level now. What do I do next? So I always say, step by step is the way to reach. Then only it's possible to achieve the goal which you want. And I consider myself still I am at level 2 or level 3. I don't imagine myself at higher levels. So the idea is that, there is a lot of things to do around still. So you don't have to look. The idea of talking of levels was that this is the way you have to think to move further. That's what I meant.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for answering the questions. So I'm not seeing any more questions in
One
the
more
chat
question
box.
has come from Suganya.
Sukhan,
What
yeah.
qualities are lacking among today's leaders?
Okay.
Anybody would like to take a call on that?
I would probably say if the person is lacking a quality, then he's not a leader. Then you see, there was one point of accountability which I did not talk about. It is called political and democratic accountability, which is the government's accountability to the healthcare system. I purposely didn't talk about that. But when you say leader, if you're talking about what we are talking about in leadership in this thing is not your political leaders or the number of votes that you get. We are talking about your ability to create a set of people who are going to follow you because they think what you're doing is right. That is leadership. It is not the fact that you are an MLA or an MP or a councillor or whatever. That is not. That does not define leadership as per this conclave.
Yeah, what is lacking in people to not become leader, I can try to tell, is today the what do you call as the traits of what do you call as inclusivity is being reduced. People do not have that culture of inclusive approach to their thing. They always look at the individualistic way of doing things. Whether it is work or whether it is success, everybody looks at the individual thing. I think one of the things which we should all learn is inclusivity and how we can build a very, very, what do you call as an environment where people would like to be a part of with you or part of your activities. I think this is very, very important today. We find people working more and more in isolation. I think which I think we should try to look at. I think that's what I would like to say. Try to be inclusive, try to see how you can look beyond yourself is something very important at this stage.
Sir, I want to ask you something. It is related to one of your Facebook posts, which I usually follow very religiously. Sir, you had written something once few days back about the leadership fatigue. So would you please add few points on this so that a lot of people will have some understanding about it?
Yeah. See, what happens is while providing leadership continuously in an organization, let us say there's a maybe like Best Buy, what he said, and if there is any other organization that needs to go up, and you keep doing your best and best and best for the people around you, you start off feeling, am I doing the right thing? You start looking at, am I failing? Is there somewhere I'm going wrong? And then you start looking at, I have done my best, and you try to give up. In fact, I just had noted down something which I always say. I have got this diary. I keep putting my thoughts in that and keep it. In this type of situation, I didn't know you were going to ask this question. See, there is the first level which comes with people is first quarter. I call like the 4 quarters in a year. I call this as 4 quarters. First level is you get into a denial mode. Oh, nothing will happen to us. Everything will be fine, and we need not worry about it. It's happening in China. Why should it come to us? That's the first stage we get into it. But next stage is like, you go to, okay, it has come to India. So what? I'm wearing my mask. I have vaccinated. It will not come to me. That means now you are bargaining yourself for that. Nothing is going to happen. I will be achieving this thing anyway. There's nothing will happen. The third quarter is then you say, no, actually, I have put vaccination, I have put mask, everything is there. But why did I get this? You get into the mode of what is happening to us? Why all these deaths are taking place? We have done everything that is possible. Like that is the third quadrant. And at that time, you need to have support and be courageous. So that's where the fatigue is setting into the stage. You need support at that time. You have to be courageous. Sometimes you be afraid inside, but you have to get on and say, okay, let me inspire others and move on. But many people, what happens is at that level, they become very fatigued. They say, okay, I have done my best. I can't help it. Let whatever happens now. And that's the stage 4 comes in and you say, okay, now what to do? Whenever it gets over, it gets over. Let's go with that till then. That should know. You should not creep into the 4th quarter of your leadership level. So this is the typical stage. So I think that's what I mean. People are getting into leadership fatigue. How long can you go on motivating your teachers? You teach online, excellent world is there. You do this, you do that. How long you can motivate the students? How long you can go on motivating the workforce to do certain things? So at stage you get fatigued, now what to do next. So that's where you need little more strength to move on, is what I said. And somebody asked me, what is that level 6 beyond, leadership and beyond? As I said yesterday in my talk, this is something which I have put. That means at this position, when you are at level 6, you are in that position or in that level of leadership, you do not look for a position. You don't look that, can I become this? Can I become that? You are identified by yourself. One typical example I can give you of level 6 leadership is Dr. Abdul Kalam. He didn't need a position. He didn't need a position of presidentship. He didn't need the position of being a scientific advisor to the government. Once it's all over, he is out. Now, but still people remembered him. He is perhaps the most remembered president than anybody else right from the independence today. I think that is level 6 leadership. Even without being a president, he was a challenge to the sitting presidents. So that is level 6. So you want to reach there, it's excellent goal. You have to reach there. People know you for what you are but not associated with the position. And such people keep making other leaders. They will not be happy that, oh, I have reached this position. They only believe is make others, the people, the leaders there.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, can I take one last question from Seema?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, she wants to know the relationship between leadership and power. These two have been in conflict always.
See, power is something which you try to use what you call as over our people or organization or thing which is defined by certain laws and rules, that people listen to you only because it is there in the law. You are expected to follow that. Like a police inspector tells you to stop driving or without this thing because the law says you cannot do the driving in a particular manner. But if, let us say, the law does not provide him, will he be able to convince the person that he should not drive in this particular way? So that is the difference, subtle difference between the power and leadership. People will listen to a leader even if it is not written down in the law. They will believe him because he is right. He cannot be wrong. When he says something, even if it is not a written down document, I'll go by his thing. So that's a very important thing which we should understand. Like you may give all the powers in a particular position. He can at the most read it out to the people. I will punish you if you don't do this. I'll punish you if you don't do this. I think he can go on talking about it. But even if it is not written down, if some people would be there, they'll just tell them, okay, I leave it to you. You want to work with me, you are welcome to come and work. And they will continue to work with you. That is leadership. That's a different thing which will.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering all the questions. I think I'm not seeing any new, something new popped up. Let me just have a look. Sir, another question that has come. So how do we evaluate success of a leader?
I put the message already.
Yes, sir.
No, sorry. Success of a leader.
Success of a leader.
Okay. Do you need to evaluate the success of a leader? The question again. Why? Because a leader looks at the larger good and takes whatever actions that are required. He doesn't do it by goals. Okay. Now, what is called as now, let us say if it's a company. there are company has got two different roles. One is he is accountable to the shareholders, because people who have invested in him in the company, he has to be loyal to them. Second type is that he is also look at the what we call as a larger or a social good. Like, what may be good for the company to make the profit may not necessarily be good for the society or for the community that is there. So a leader is measured by this, like, not only he is looking at the stakeholders, the shareholders' expectations, but also looking at the stakeholders' benefits. In our case itself, let us say if you take the hospital setting, if you look at generating revenue for the hospital alone as a factor, then it's wrong. If you look at the hospital revenue as a incidental to the stakeholders' interest of providing best health care, I think that's the success of a leader who's there.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. There's some question from Bharat. Bharat, he has mentioned that the question reads like, how important is referent power of a leader?
Referent power?
Yeah, I just want to unmute him, sir, so that he can himself ask whether if there are any. Yeah. Bharat, can you unmute yourself and please? So maybe I'll get the question again from him a bit later, and then we can have a discussion about it tomorrow.
Yes, audible?
Yeah, Bharat, yeah, please tell me. Yeah, please.
Referent power is the ability to influence the followers.
So the question is,
how important is it?
Let me.
How important is this referent power, that is ability to influence others?
I did not use the word to influence others will be the right word. How it is not very important to influence people to do it. I think that means I believe in a particular, I don't want to give example here by name, but I can say there is a particular healthcare professional who is respected for all his achievements, let us say. Now he comes and make a statement outside telling that this is not good for you, don't do it. But is that the right thing? I think that should not be the way of looking at it. Referent power of it should not be there. It should not be the prime factor is what I would like it. I can tell several names in this direction. But in the larger time, they start failing. When you look at it, they start failing. Now, one of the most important thing of a leader, which I keep telling, in fact, I was reading on LinkedIn and I made a very comment there, which was accepted by the author. If you are on LinkedIn, you can go and follow one author from Singapore who is there. His name is David Wee. Every day he gives a story there or an incident or anecdote, and he asks people to respond to that, what it is. So that's where I mentioned was that there was a comment. Of course, it's not a politics. I should not make it. There was a comment of one of the chief ministers of India making about the infection in the Singapore. It is a Singapore strain that has come to India or whatever it was, which has been the response statement. So that author himself is a Singaporean, so he was feeling very offended. And he wrote, please don't ignore that statement, because that one individual does not represent India. There are a lot of good people in India, good leaders in India, and they should not be, you should not look at that as that person as an India. He is an individual, that's all. And of course, there are a lot of comments and other things which were there. And I gave a comment back there myself, I gave him. It is not the question of what the comment is or where the disease has originated, it is there. But the most important point which the author is making is that a person is in a responsible position is expected to make responsible statements. You cannot make statements which are, it may be true, but making a statement to that effect is going to create more adverse things to the persons or to the society and create more harm. So I think that people have to be there, which he very well acknowledged, and he said, I hope more people read this. That's what he had told. So the point is, like, a person who is influencing has got that thing, has to make certain responsible remarks also to move forward. I think that should not be there. It is not the only power. I think you have a right, then yes, it's a power.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So there's one more very classical question. So how to handle the subordinates who do not take ownership or authority of the task entrusted?
Yeah, maybe somebody else wants to give a try. Dr. VG or
Can you repeat the question, Praveen?
yeah, Ravi is
Sir,
there. Yeah.
Yes, sir. How to handle? There will be some people, subordinates, who do not want to take the leadership at all, and they do not want to take the ownership of whatever task they are doing. So, how do we handle them?
The point is, if somebody doesn't want to be a leader, then why do you try to make him a leader? The whole purpose of leadership is that it is something that's driving you, something that you want to do. You want to come up or you want to improve yourself or whatever. So the person doesn't want to be a leader and doesn't want to take accountability. You'll become a follower at any point in whatever field that you do, even if you have your own shop. Ultimately, there is something called accountability which you will have. You have a financial accountability. If you have your own shop, you have your own business, you have a financial accountability. You're accountable to somebody at some point. So there's no such situation where you cannot be accountable at all. Even if you are a student in a school, you're accountable to your teacher, you're accountable to your parents as to how you fare in the exams. Accountability is something that you're born with. So the question of whether he wants to be a leader or not is different. But accountability is something you can't escape. That's my opinion.
Thank you. I saw one very interesting question. I think it is given by Harish. He has asked, how do we manage disagreements, particularly and if leaders and colleagues, if it is there, how to handle disagreements? There is a very interesting, again, study on the disagreement, conflict situation and managing conflict situation and managing disagreements in a team and moving forward. I think basically it goes down to the context. What is the context of disagreement? I think that is where we have to start at. It is not the individual itself, and it is not the situation. What is the context of the disagreement that has happened? And if the context is justifiable, I think either the person who is right or whatever it is, he should be able to tell it in a particularly very nice way. This is where the leadership comes into place. I can tell this with great this thing. I have had several people who had to meet, and I may want to express my view with them in very big positions. I'm telling, they will disagree with me. First thing is, when your person is disagreeing with you and all that, first listen to what the person is telling. And then I always start, yes, sir, your view is right, but I would like to tell this from the larger point of view. So he accepts that you are accepting his viewpoint. And then he is a little more listening to you. Okay, tell me what's your view. Once you don't listen and you only keep on telling you are right, he says, how can he tell that? I think there is a different levels with which we can address that, but it is definitely addressable. It is not that managing a disagreement situation or a conflict situation is a big challenge. It has to develop that culture, and it has to move forward with that. I think we can have a session one day separately on the managing disagreements, art of persuasion, and all these things are very classical things which are happening around the world, and we can move towards that.
Thank you, sir. So there's one question from Dr. Pushpalata. She asks, sir, does the success of a leader, does success is the only measure of a good leader? Anything else we can add along with that?
So I always go to that, asking what is the success you are looking at? Whether it is for you the success or for the individual the success. See, what if an individual may feel he is successful, you may feel he is not successful. It is again the measure of success varies. Like I used to always ask the students in a class, how many of you would like to be failures? Nobody will put up the hand. They'll say all we would like to be successful. Now, what is the measure of success for a person? Whether it is the money for him a success, the position is a success, or whether the happiness in life is success, whether it is the good, the peaceful life he wants to lead is a success. What is that measure of success which you're looking at? I think it is to be decided by the individual, whether it's a leader or whether it is the follower, whoever it is there. Success is measured by them. Let us say if my success, if I would like to see, my measure of success would be, let us say, to look at all my colleagues in the university system happy. If they are happy, I feel that I am successful. That may be the measure which I would look at as happy, as a measure of success. But somebody else from outside may view it, oh, his success is based on what rank he is getting, where he is achieving. That may be the measure he may look at as the success measure. So I think this is, again, you have to look at what point you are looking at success and where it is. If a person is in department, if you feel your students are happy, your department is running well, and you are doing your publications and you are doing everything which you want to do and gives you happiness, that's the measure of your success. It need not be something which everybody else should tell, here is a successful person. If you do all these things, automatically they will recognize you for what you are doing. My comments always are more emotional and more from the heart rather than any from book. So I think I leave it at that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks
you for very pertinent and practical remarks. I think we are almost done with all the questions. And so if there is anything else, or if we can wind up today's session. Concluding remarks from us.
Thank you, sir. I think it's been a very fruitful afternoon. I lost connectivity. There was a lot of lightning in my area. I lost connectivity in between. And I couldn't hear the first lecture, but I listened to one of my good friends, Dr. Ravi. I call him MD, and he was very, very forthright and frank in what he spoke, and the discussions we had with you, of course, as the fulcrum every time to balance all of us. I think most of your comments were well taken, sir, and I think the first person I have to congratulate today is Dr. Praveen, who took over at the last moment and did a good job and controlled the situation well. And it was very, very heartening to see my younger brother Prashant on the screen after all that he went through yesterday. And we're all with you, Prashant. We're always there with you. But what, sir, are the qualities of a leader? I just saw one question popping up just before you all concluded. That was, there's always a critic in the team, and whether you should listen to him or you should ignore him. I think it was something like that, to that extent. And what my belief is that you should be able to take criticism in your stride. You should take criticism in your stride, and you should try to bring that person into your team, work for the team, by giving him that additional, whatever he was criticizing about, you give him that responsibility and see how he responds to it. If you think the system is wrong, or if you think your team is not doing well, or you think your leader is not doing well, I think he should teach us what should be done. And I think that itself will defeat the very purpose of what he is questioning you. So that was one of the things I wanted to add. And also that any leader, I think he has to not only lead from the front, but then he has to identify all the qualities in his team and work for that and make them use their strong points to build up the team. I think that is one of the good qualities a leader should have, that I am the leader, you listen to me. That can never make you a leader. And he has to take the whole team with them, identify their strong points, and their weak points, he tries to overcome their weak points. That will be a qualities of a good leader. All in all, it was a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to another wonderful day tomorrow. And sir, I hope your imposing presence is always there with us. Tomorrow also you'll be there. I think we have an interesting panel discussion of which I'm also a part, and I've been actually reading a lot about that, and I think we'll have a good, fruitful discussion tomorrow. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Good evening and be safe and be well. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all the participants, and thank you all the head of the institutions, and thank you so much for joining. We will end the session.